He didn't come back to save the house. The house saved him. After 5 years away, Marcus came home expecting nothing but dust and decay. Instead, he found a fully rebuilt house and a mysterious woman standing inside like she belonged there. When his son whispered that it still smelled like Grandma's kitchen, Marcus realized something unsettling. Maybe he wasn't the only one who never truly left. The truck rattled as it turned off Jefferson Avenue and rolled into a street Marcus Reed barely recognized anymore. 5 years. 5 years was supposed to be enough time to turn a place into nothing more than memory, a set of coordinates, a name on an old envelope you didn't open anymore. That's what Marcus had told himself every mile from Cleveland to Detroit, hands locked on the wheel, radio low, mind louder than anything coming through the speakers. Jaden was asleep in the back seat, curled up against a worn hoodie, one sneaker still on, the other kicked off somewhere near the door. The soft hum of his breathing filled the cab in a way that steadied Marcus just enough to keep driving. He hadn't planned to come back. Not really. But then the letter came. Forwarded twice, creased, stamped. Final notice in red that bled through the envelope like a warning he couldn't ignore anymore. Property tax delinquency. Risk of seizure. 30 days. He'd stared at it for a long time at the kitchen counter of that cramped apartment above the auto shop. Grease stains still on his hands. The smell of Freon clinging to his clothes. He knew what it meant. He knew what would happen if he didn't show up. And more than that, he heard Jaden's voice from a week earlier, quiet, almost casual. "Do we ever get a house again?" Marcus hadn't answered. Now here he was. The truck slowed as the street narrowed, cracked pavement giving way to patches of dirt and weeds pushing through like they'd been waiting years for permission. Streetlights flickered overhead, some dead, some buzzing, casting uneven pools of yellow light across boarded-up houses and chain-link fences that leaned like tired men. This was the block. Or at least, it used to be. Marcus eased his foot off the gas, scanning the row of houses. Most of them looked like what he expected. Windows boarded, paint peeling, porches sagging under years of neglect. The kind of quiet that didn't feel peaceful, just abandoned. He exhaled slowly. Yeah, that made sense. That's what he deserved to come back to. He turned the wheel, guiding the truck toward the end of the block, where his mother's house should be sitting in the same state he'd left it. Locked, dark, forgotten. But then he saw it. Marcus blinked once. Then again. The truck rolled to a stop in the middle of the street, engine idling, headlights cutting across something that didn't belong in this place. The gate. The old rusted gate his mom used to complain about, the one that never closed right, hanging crooked on one hinge. That gate was gone. In its place stood a new one, straight, painted, solid. Marcus leaned forward slightly, his hands tightening on the steering wheel. No, he muttered under his breath. Beyond the gate, the yard wasn't overgrown. It wasn't dead. It was clean. Grass cut low, edges trimmed. A narrow path lined with small solar lights led straight to the porch. On one side there were raised garden beds, actual garden beds, with green leaves catching the last light of the evening. Marcus felt something shift in his chest, something between confusion and something he wasn't ready to name. This wasn't right. This wasn't possible. He cut the engine. Silence dropped heavy around him, broken only by the distant hum of traffic and the faint buzz of a streetlight overhead. Jaden stirred in the back seat, letting out a soft groan. Where are we at? He mumbled, voice thick with sleep. Marcus didn't answer right away. His eyes were locked on the house. The porch had been repaired. Fresh boards, railings straight. The front door, his front door, was painted a deep, clean blue. And the windows, they were glowing. Warm, steady yellow light spilling through the curtains like someone was inside, like someone was living there. Marcus swallowed hard. "Stay in the truck," he said finally, his voice low, controlled. Jaden rubbed his eyes, pushing himself up. "This it?" Marcus nodded once, not taking his eyes off the house. "Yeah," he said. "This is it." He reached for the door handle and stepped out. The air hit him cool and dry, carrying the faint smell of cut grass and something else, something softer, warmer. Food. He froze for half a second. Food. Not mold, not dust, not the stale emptiness he'd expected. Food. Marcus shut the door quietly and walked toward the gate, boots crunching against gravel that hadn't been there before. Every step felt heavier than the last, like he was walking into something that wasn't his anymore, even though every part of him insisted it was. He reached the gate and pushed it open. It didn't creak. It didn't resist. It swung smoothly, silently, like it had been waiting. Marcus stepped inside. The yard was real, not some trick of the light. The garden beds were full, collard greens, tomatoes, herbs he recognized from his mother's cooking. A small wooden bench sat near the porch, worn but sturdy, like someone used it every day. He moved slowly, eyes taking in everything. The porch steps didn't sag when he climbed them. They held. That alone almost stopped him. He stood there for a moment, looking at the door. His door. His hand lifted, hesitated, then curled into a fist. He knocked. Once, twice. The sound echoed inside, solid, immediate. Marcus felt his heartbeat pick up, louder than it should have been. Footsteps. He heard them before he could process what that meant. Footsteps. Inside, moving toward the door. Marcus straightened, every muscle in his body tightening. The handle turned. The door opened. And there she was. A woman, mid-30s maybe, stood in the doorway, a dish towel in her hands, sleeves rolled up to her elbows. Her hair was pulled back loosely, a few strands falling across her face. There was flour on her wrist, a smudge of something, sauce maybe, on the side of her shirt. She didn't look startled. She didn't look afraid. She looked like she belonged there, like this was her door to open. Her eyes moved over Marcus once, quick but careful, taking in his worn jacket, his work boots, the tension in his shoulders. Then she spoke. "Can I help you?" Marcus didn't answer right away. For a second, the world narrowed to just that doorway, that light behind her, the smell of something cooking drifting past her shoulder into the evening air. His jaw tightened. His hand curled into a fist at his side. He took one step forward. "This is my house," he said, his voice steady but edged with something deeper. "So I'm going to ask you the same thing." The woman didn't flinch, didn't step back. She just looked at him, really looked at him this time, and something in her expression shifted. Not fear, not guilt. Something more complicated. Marcus held her gaze, his heart pounding now, anger and confusion twisting together in his chest. He let the words land. Then, quieter, but sharper. "Why are you in my house?" The words hung between them, heavy and unmovable. For a moment, the woman didn't answer. She just stood there in the doorway, the warm light from inside framing her silhouette, the smell of something simmering, onions, garlic, maybe, drifting past her shoulder like it had every right to be there. Then she spoke. "I could ask you the same thing," she said calmly. Marcus blinked, caught off guard by the tone more than the words. There was no fear in her voice, no panic, just steadiness. "This isn't a joke," Marcus said, his jaw tightening. "I own this place. My name's on it. My family built this house." She studied him for a second longer, like she was measuring something unseen. Then she stepped back slightly and opened the door wider. "Then you should probably come in," she said, "because standing out there yelling isn't going to help either of us." Marcus didn't move right away. Every instinct in his body told him to push past her, to take control, to remind her whose house this was, but something about the way she said it, like she wasn't challenging him, just stating a fact, made him hesitate. Behind him, the truck door creaked open. Jaden climbed out, rubbing his eyes, looking from Marcus to the woman and back again. "Dad?" he said softly. Marcus glanced over his shoulder. "Stay close," he said. Jaden nodded and walked up beside him, small but steady. The woman's gaze dropped to the boy for just a second. Something softened in her expression, barely noticeable, but there. Then it was gone. Marcus stepped forward, crossing the threshold. The moment he entered, the air changed. It hit him all at once, warmth. Not just temperature, but presence, life, the quiet hum of a place being lived in. The floors were clean, the walls repainted. The old couch his mother used to keep covered in blankets had been replaced with something simple but cared for. A lamp glowed in the corner. A stack of books sat neatly on a small table. Nothing expensive, but everything intentional. Marcus's eyes moved slowly across the room, taking it in piece by piece like he didn't trust himself to see it all at once. "You did all this?" he asked, his voice lower now. The woman closed the door behind them. "Yeah," she said, "over time." Marcus turned to face her fully now. "Who are you?" A brief pause. "Claire," she said. "Claire Whitmore." The name didn't mean anything to him. Not yet. "And you've been living here?" Marcus pressed. "For 2 years," she replied. 2 years. The number landed like a weight. Marcus let out a short breath, almost a laugh, but there was no humor in it. "You broke into a house and just decided to stay for 2 years?" he said. Claire shook her head slightly. "The door wasn't locked," she said. "Windows were boarded. Roof was leaking. Pipes were shot. Nobody had been here in a long time. That doesn't make it yours." "I never said it did." The words were simple, but they didn't carry apology. Marcus felt something tighten in his chest again. "You could have left," he said. "Anytime. Found somewhere else." Claire met his gaze without flinching. "So could you." The room went quiet. Jaden shifted beside Marcus, sensing the tension without fully understanding it. Marcus's jaw clenched. "I didn't come back for an argument," he said. "I came back because this place is mine, legally. I got the paperwork." "Then show it to me," Claire said. Marcus hesitated, then reached back toward the door, grabbing the worn folder from the truck seat. He flipped it open and handed it over. Claire took it, scanning the first page carefully. Her eyes moved slower than he expected, like she wasn't just reading, she was absorbing. The silence stretched. Marcus watched her face, waiting for something. Defensiveness, guilt, anything. Instead, what he saw was understanding. Not agreement, not surrender. just understanding. After a moment, she closed the folder and handed it back. "I didn't know your name," she said quietly, "but I knew someone owned this place. I found a letter once, tucked under the floor in the back room." Marcus frowned. "What letter?" She nodded toward the kitchen. "Come here." Marcus exchanged a quick look with Jaden, then followed. The kitchen was almost the same. Same layout, same window over the sink. But everything else clean, repaired, alive. A pot sat on the stove, steam rising gently. The smell was stronger here now. Vegetable stew, maybe, something simple but warm. Claire walked to a small shelf near the wall and picked up a wooden box. She held it for a second before setting it down on the table. "I found this about a year in," she said. Marcus stepped closer, his heart beating a little faster now for reasons he couldn't explain. He opened the box. Inside, a folded piece of paper, 2 rings, and a photograph. Marcus froze. He recognized it instantly. His mother's handwriting, his parents' wedding rings. The photo of them standing in the yard, years ago, before everything went quiet. His throat tightened. "You kept this?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Claire nodded. "It didn't belong to me," she said, "so I left it where I could see it. In case someone came back." Marcus stared down at the box, something shifting deep inside him now, something heavier than anger. Behind him, the screen door creaked. Voices. Low, curious. Marcus turned his head slightly. Through the front window, he could see shapes gathering outside. Neighbors. Watching. A woman stepped onto the porch without knocking. Miss Evelyn from down the block. Older, sharp-eyed, always watching everything. She looked from Marcus to Claire, then crossed her arms. "So you're the one who came back," she said. Marcus straightened slightly. "Yeah, I am." Miss Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "Funny," she said. "Didn't think we'd see you again." The words hit harder than they should have. "I had my reasons," Marcus replied. "I'm sure you did," she said, her tone dry. Then she glanced at Claire. Claire's been the one keeping this place from falling apart, feeding folks, fixing things, making sure nobody tears it down. She looked back at Marcus, eyes narrowing just a little. "Where were you when that needed doing?" Marcus didn't answer. He couldn't. Because the truth wasn't something he could say out loud. Not here, not like this. Miss Evelyn let the silence sit, then turned and stepped back off the porch. The murmurs outside didn't stop. Marcus stood there in the middle of his own kitchen, holding a box that proved this place was his, while everything around him suggested it belonged to someone else. He looked at Claire. She didn't look proud. She didn't look defensive. She just looked steady, like someone who had been here long enough to stop needing permission. Marcus exhaled slowly, the weight of it all settling in. The house was his, but somehow, he was the one who didn't belong. And for the first time since he stepped through that door, a question crept in that he didn't want to ask. Even if he could prove it was his, would that be enough to take it back? The question didn't leave Marcus's mind. It stayed there, quiet but heavy, as the murmurs outside slowly faded and the neighbors drifted back to their porches, their windows, their lives. But he could still feel their eyes on him, even after they were gone. Judging, measuring, remembering. Marcus stood in the kitchen, the wooden box still open on the table, his mother's handwriting staring up at him like something unfinished. He folded the letter carefully and set it back inside. Jaden hadn't moved far. The boy had wandered deeper into the house, drawn by something Marcus couldn't see yet. His small footsteps echoed softly against the clean floors. "Don't touch anything," Marcus called out, though his voice didn't carry the authority it usually did. "Okay," Jaden replied, but he was already drifting, already exploring. Claire stepped back toward the stove and turned the burner down slightly. The low simmer softened, the quiet bubbling of the pot filling the space again. "You can stay for dinner," she said, not looking at Marcus. Marcus blinked, caught off guard. "We didn't come here to—" "I know," she interrupted gently, "but your son looks like he hasn't eaten anything warm in a while. That hit harder than it should have." Marcus opened his mouth to respond, but nothing came out right away. Because she wasn't wrong. Jaden's voice floated in from the hallway. Marcus turned. Jaden stood near the doorway to the living room, his hand resting lightly against the wall, like he was trying to feel something through it. "It smells like Grandma's kitchen," he said softly. The words landed slow, not loud, not dramatic, just true. Marcus felt his chest tighten. For a second, the room around him blurred, not physically, but somewhere deeper, like his memory had stepped forward and pushed everything else back. That same smell. Collard greens on the stove, onions cooking down slow. His mom humming under her breath while she stirred something in a pot, telling him to sit down and eat before it got cold. Marcus swallowed hard. Jaden stepped further into the room, eyes moving around slowly, taking everything in like it mattered. "I remember this part," he said quietly, pointing toward the corner where the old couch used to be. "That's where Grandma used to sit." Marcus glanced over. The couch was different now, newer, cleaner, but it sat in the exact same place, like it had always belonged there. Claire watched the exchange from the kitchen, her expression unreadable, but her hands had gone still. Jaden moved toward the table, peeking into the pot on the stove. "What is that?" he asked. "Vegetable stew," Claire answered. "It smells good," he said, almost surprised. Claire nodded once. "It is." Marcus rubbed the back of his neck, looking between them, feeling something shift in the air. This wasn't how this was supposed to go. He was supposed to show up, prove the house was his, make it clear, take control. Instead, his son was standing in a kitchen that felt more like home than anything Marcus had given him in years. "And it wasn't because of him, Auden," Marcus said, a little firmer this time. "Come here." Jaden hesitated, then walked back over. Marcus crouched slightly so they were eye level. "We're not staying," he said quietly. "Not yet." Jaden looked back toward the stove, then at the living room, then back at his father. "Why not?" he asked. Marcus paused. There were 100 answers he could give. None of them felt right. "Because we don't know what's going on yet," he said finally. Jaden frowned slightly, processing that. "But it feels like home," he said. Marcus closed his eyes for half a second. "Yeah, that was the problem." He stood back up slowly. Claire ladled some of the stew into 2 bowls and set them on the table without a word. "I'm not asking you to stay," she said, her voice calm. "I'm just saying, you don't have to leave hungry." Marcus stared at the bowls. Steam curled upward, soft and steady. Jaden looked at him, not asking, not pushing, just waiting. Marcus exhaled through his nose. 10 minutes, he said finally. That's it. Claire didn't react. She just nodded once and pulled out a chair. Jaden climbed into it like he'd been doing it his whole life. Marcus sat across from him, slower, more cautious, like the chair might not hold him the way the house had. They ate in silence at first. The stew was simple, but it was good. Warm in a way that didn't just hit your stomach, it settled somewhere deeper. Jaden took a second bite, then a third. "This is better than the stuff from the store," he said. Claire almost smiled. "Yeah," she said. "It usually is." Marcus didn't say anything. He just ate and listened. The soft clink of the spoon against the bowl, the low hum of the stove, the faint sound of a bus passing somewhere down the block. It had been a long time since a room felt this steady. After a few minutes, Jaden looked up. "Do you live here by yourself?" he asked Claire. "For the most part," she said. "Sometimes people come by, eat, talk, then they leave. Like a restaurant?" Claire shook her head slightly. "Not exactly." Marcus glanced at her. "More like a place people don't get turned away from," she added. That explained the extra chairs stacked near the wall, the larger pot, the worn spots on the floor where people had walked the same paths over and over. Marcus leaned back slightly in his chair, studying her now with a different kind of attention. "You've been feeding people out of my house," he said. Claire met his gaze. "I've been feeding people who needed it," she replied. "That's not your responsibility." "Neither is fixing a place that was falling apart," she said. "But here we are." Marcus's jaw tightened again, but this time the edge wasn't as sharp. Because part of him already knew, if she hadn't done it, there wouldn't be anything left to come back to. Jaden finished his bowl and sat back, looking more awake than he had all day. "Can we stay here tonight?" he asked, almost casually. Marcus looked at him, then at the room, then at Claire. The answer should have been simple. It wasn't. Claire didn't say anything. She just stood there, waiting. Marcus rubbed his hands together slowly, thinking. He had the paperwork. He had the right. But rights didn't feel like enough anymore. Not in this room. Not with his son looking at him like that. Not with the smell of his mother's cooking still hanging in the air. Marcus exhaled. "We'll figure it out," he said. Jaden nodded, accepting that. Claire turned back to the stove, like the conversation was already settled for now. But Marcus knew it wasn't, because this wasn't just about a house anymore. It was about something he had left behind, and someone else had carried it forward. And now, he didn't know if he was taking it back or stepping into something that had already moved on without him. That feeling followed Marcus through the rest of the night. He didn't leave. Not right away. 10 minutes had turned into an hour, then 2. By the time the stew pot was empty and the dishes were rinsed and stacked near the sink, the sky outside had gone completely dark. The streetlights buzzed faintly, casting thin slices of pale light through the curtains. Jaden had fallen asleep on the couch. Just drifted off. 1 minute he was asking a question about the garden. The next his head had tipped sideways, his breathing slow and steady, like his body had decided before his mind that this was a place it could rest. Marcus stood there watching him for a long time. Something about that didn't sit easy. Not because Jaden was sleeping, but because of how fast it happened. Kids like his son didn't fall asleep in strange places. Not after the last 5 years. Not after nights in cheap motels where doors didn't lock right, or long drives where sleep came in pieces and never all at once. But here, He slept like he wasn't waiting for anything to go wrong. Marcus exhaled slowly. Claire wiped her hands on a towel and moved quietly around the kitchen, not saying much. She didn't ask if they were staying, didn't offer blankets, didn't push. She just moved like she always did. Like this was still her routine. Marcus leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. "You always do that?" he asked. Claire glanced over. "Do what?" "Feed people. Let them come in. Sit down like this place is theirs." Claire dried a plate slowly before answering. "Yeah," she said. "Most days." Marcus shook his head slightly. "You don't know who they are. I don't need to. That's not how the world works." Claire met his eyes. "It is if you decide it is." Marcus let out a quiet breath through his nose. "That's not realistic." "No," she said. "It's just different." The room went quiet again. Marcus pushed off the wall and walked over to the window, pulling the curtain aside just enough to look out. The block looked the same as before. Dim, worn down, quiet in that heavy way that meant people were inside, keeping to themselves. But there were small differences now. A porch light across the street that actually worked. A car parked that hadn't been there earlier. Little signs of life that didn't belong to the version of this place he had left behind. He let the curtain fall back into place. "You changed things," he said, not turning around. Claire didn't answer right away. "I fixed what I could," she said finally. Marcus turned then, studying her more carefully. "Why here?" he asked. "Out of all the places you could have gone, why this house?" Claire held his gaze for a moment, then looked down at the counter, like she was deciding how much to say. "Because it was empty," she said, "and because it didn't have to stay that way." "That's it?" "That's enough." Marcus shook his head. "No, it's not," he said. "People don't just walk into a place like this and decide to rebuild it for no reason." Claire didn't argue. She just set the last plate down and leaned lightly against the counter. "You're right," she said. Marcus waited, but she didn't continue. That was all she was giving him. And for some reason, that bothered him more than if she had lied. Before he could press further, a knock came at the door. 3 short taps. Marcus stiffened. Claire didn't. She walked over and opened it without hesitation. A man stood outside, mid-40s, worn jacket, hands shoved deep into his pockets. His face looked tired, but not unfamiliar. He glanced past Claire and spotted Marcus. "Didn't know you had company," he said. Claire nodded. "It's fine. Come in, Tony." Tony stepped inside, giving Marcus a quick once-over. "You the one came back?" he asked. Marcus didn't like the way that sounded. "Yeah," he said. Tony nodded slowly. "About time," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. Marcus's jaw tightened again, but he held it. Tony moved toward the kitchen like he'd done it 100 times before. "Got anything left?" he asked. Claire pointed to the pot, still warm. Tony grabbed a bowl without asking, filling it halfway, then leaning back against the counter as he ate. The room felt smaller now, more crowded, more real. Marcus watched the interaction closely. No tension, no awkwardness, just routine. "You know him?" Tony asked Claire, nodding toward Marcus. Claire shook her head slightly. "Not yet." Tony smirked faintly. "That'll be interesting," he said. Marcus stepped forward slightly. "This ain't a shelter," he said. "You can't just—" "It's not a shelter," Claire said calmly. "It's a house." Marcus looked at her. And you're treating it like it's yours. Claire didn't respond to that. Instead, she glanced toward Jaden, still asleep on the couch. You can take the bedroom, she said quietly, for tonight. Marcus blinked. No, he said immediately. Claire shrugged slightly. Then the couch, or the floor, doesn't matter to me. I'm not staying, Marcus said. Claire nodded once. Okay. But she didn't move to show them out. Didn't push, didn't argue. She just accepted it. And somehow that made it harder to leave. Marcus looked at Jaden again. Still asleep. Still peaceful. He rubbed his face with one hand, tired in a way that went deeper than just the drive. This is temporary, he said finally. Claire didn't react. Just until I figure things out, Marcus added. Okay, she said again. That was it. No conditions. No agreement. Just space. Marcus let out a slow breath. Jaden stays in the room, he said. I'll take the couch. Claire nodded. Sheets are in the hallway closet, she said. Tony finished his bowl and set it in the sink. I'll head out, he said. Then he looked at Marcus one more time. You got a good thing here, he added. Marcus didn't answer. Tony stepped out into the night, the door closing softly behind him. The house fell quiet again. Marcus stood there in the middle of it, feeling like he had just agreed to something bigger than a place to sleep. Something he didn't fully understand yet. Claire turned off the kitchen light, leaving only the soft glow from the lamp in the living room. Get some rest, she said. You'll need it. Marcus didn't ask why. He just watched her walk down the hallway, disappearing into a space that used to belong to him. He looked around one more time. At the walls, the furniture, the small details that carried more weight than he wanted to admit. Then he walked over to Jaden, lifting him carefully and carrying him toward the bedroom. The same room Marcus had slept in as a kid. The same walls. But different now. Everything was different now. He laid Jaden down gently, pulling a blanket over him. The boy didn't stir. Marcus stood there for a moment, watching him. Then he stepped back into the hallway. The house was quiet, but not empty. And for the first time since he got back, Marcus wasn't sure if that was a problem, or exactly what he had been missing. Sleep didn't come easy. The couch felt unfamiliar under his back, the springs softer than they should have been, the blanket carrying a faint scent that didn't belong to him. Not unpleasant, just not his. The house made noise in ways he didn't remember. A quiet hum from the refrigerator, pipes shifting behind the walls, the soft creak of floorboards settling as the night cooled outside. Marcus stared up at the ceiling, hands folded over his chest, listening. Not for danger, but for something else. For the feeling he used to have when he lived here, the one that told him everything was where it was supposed to be. He didn't feel that. Not yet. Somewhere down the hallway, a door opened and closed softly. Footsteps. Light. Measured. Claire. He turned his head slightly, watching as a thin line of light slipped under the doorframe, then disappeared again. She was still awake. Of course she was. Marcus closed his eyes, but his mind didn't follow. It stayed moving, through 5 years of empty rooms, cheap apartments, long nights fixing things that belonged to other people, never staying long enough for anything to feel permanent. And now he was back, in a house that had survived without him, because someone else made sure it did. That thought sat heavy. Sometime near morning, sleep finally took him. Not deep. Just enough. The smell woke him before anything else. Coffee. Real coffee. Not the cheap, burnt kind he was used to grabbing between jobs. This was different. Stronger. Warmer. Grounded. Marcus opened his eyes slowly. Sunlight spilled across the living room floor in long, pale lines. Dust didn't hang in the air the way it used to. The space felt clean. Alive. He sat up, rubbing a hand over his face, then glanced toward the hallway. The bedroom door was open. Jaden was gone. Marcus stood up immediately. Jaden? No answer. His chest tightened as he stepped quickly toward the kitchen and stopped. Jaden sat at the table, legs swinging slightly under the chair, a mug in front of him. Claire stood at the counter, pouring coffee into another cup, moving like she'd done it 1,000 times. Jaden looked up. "Morning," he said, like nothing about this was strange. Marcus exhaled, the tension easing just a little. "Morning," he replied, his voice rough. Claire slid the second cup across the counter toward him. Marcus hesitated, then stepped forward and picked it up. "Thanks," he muttered. She nodded once. That was it. No small talk, no awkward explanations, just quiet understanding. Jaden took a sip from his mug, then made a face. "It's not hot chocolate," he said. Claire almost smiled. "Give it time," she said. "You'll get used to it." Marcus leaned against the counter, taking a careful sip. It was good. Better than good. He didn't say that. Outside, a car engine rolled slowly down the street, tires crunching over loose gravel. Marcus glanced toward the window. A black SUV. Clean. Polished. Out of place. It slowed as it passed the house, then stopped. Marcus frowned. "That yours?" he asked Claire. She followed his gaze, then shook her head. "No." The SUV idled for a second longer. Then the driver's door opened. A man stepped out. Tall, broad shoulders, clean lines, dressed like he belonged somewhere else. Pressed shirt, dark slacks, shoes that had never touched dirt like this. He didn't look around like he was lost. He looked around like he was evaluating. Measuring. Marcus straightened. "Stay here," he said quietly to Jaden. The boy nodded, sensing the shift in tone. Marcus stepped toward the door and opened it before the man could knock. They faced each other on the porch. Up close, the man's expression was calm. Confident. The kind of calm that came from never being unsure of how things would turn out. "Morning," the man said. Marcus didn't return the greeting. "You need something?" he asked. The man's eyes flicked past him briefly, taking in the interior, then back again. "I was hoping to speak with the owner," he said. Marcus's jaw tightened. "You're looking at him." A small pause. Then the man smiled, just slightly. "That's interesting," he said. Behind Marcus, he heard Claire step into the doorway. The man's expression changed the moment he saw her. Not surprised, not confused, recognizing. "Miss Whitmore," he said smoothly. Marcus glanced back at Claire. Her face didn't change much, but something in her posture shifted. Subtle. Tighter. "Richard," she said. Marcus turned back. "You all know each other?" he asked. Neither of them answered right away. Richard Coleman adjusted his cuffs like he had all the time in the world. "I'm in development," he said finally, his attention returning to Marcus. "I've been working this area for a while now." Marcus didn't like the sound of that. "What kind of development?" he asked. "The kind that turns places like this into something more profitable." Marcus's eyes narrowed. "This place doesn't need that." Richard's smile widened slightly. "That depends on who you ask." He stepped closer, not crossing the threshold, but close enough to make his presence felt. "I've been keeping an eye on this property," he continued. "It's been sitting in a legal gray area for some time. Delinquent taxes. No active owner on record for years." Marcus felt a flicker of heat rise in his chest. "I'm here now," he said. "Yes," Richard replied. "You are." Another pause. Then Richard reached into his jacket and pulled out a thin envelope. He held it out. Marcus didn't take it. "What's that?" he asked. "An opportunity," Richard said. Marcus didn't move. Richard tilted the envelope slightly. "A way to walk away from all this with more than you came back with." Marcus let out a short breath. "I'm not selling. You haven't heard the number yet." "Doesn't matter." Richard studied him for a moment, like he was recalculating. Then he glanced past Marcus again, at the house, the yard, the small details that didn't belong to neglect anymore. "Someone's put a lot of work into this place," he said. Marcus followed his gaze, then looked back. "Yeah," he said. "They did." Richard nodded slowly. "Which makes it more valuable." He extended the envelope again. "This isn't just about a house," he said. "It's about the entire block. I'm offering you a chance to be the first one out, before everything around you changes." Marcus didn't take the envelope. Behind him, he could feel Claire standing still, watching, listening. Marcus shook his head. "I'm not going anywhere," he said. Richard's smile didn't disappear. But it did. Cool. "That's your choice," he said. Then his eyes shifted, just briefly, to Claire. "Though I imagine not everyone here has the same level of attachment." The words hung in the air. Marcus felt something tighten again. Richard stepped back slightly, slipping the envelope back into his jacket. "I'll give you time to think about it," he said. "But time tends to run out faster than people expect." He turned, walking back toward the SUV with the same measured pace. The engine started. The vehicle rolled away. Silence settled back over the yard. Marcus stood there for a long moment, staring down the street. Then he turned slowly. Claire was still in the doorway. Her expression unreadable, but her eyes weren't calm anymore. "Who is he?" Marcus asked. Claire didn't answer right away. She looked out toward where the SUV had disappeared, then back at Marcus. "He's someone who doesn't hear the word no very often," she said quietly. Marcus frowned. "And you?" he asked. A beat, Claire held his gaze. "I've said it to him before," she replied. The air shifted again, heavier this time. Marcus looked past her, into the house, at the table where his son still sat, at the place that was starting to feel like something more than just a structure, then back at her. "Yeah," he said slowly. "I got a feeling that's not the end of it." Claire didn't disagree. And that was the problem. The rest of the day moved slower than it should have. Marcus tried to shake off the feeling Richard Coleman left behind, but it clung to him like dust in the air, subtle, persistent, impossible to ignore. He spent most of the afternoon outside, walking the edges of the yard, checking the fence line, tightening loose boards that didn't really need fixing. It gave his hands something to do, because his mind wouldn't settle. Every time he looked at the house, he saw two things at once: what it used to be, and what it had become without him. Inside, Claire moved through her routine like nothing had changed. People came and went throughout the afternoon, quiet, respectful, some stopping just long enough to eat, others lingering a bit longer on the porch, talking low, sharing things Marcus didn't catch. Jaden stayed close to her, closer than Marcus liked, but not in a way that felt wrong, in a way that felt natural. That bothered him more. Around dusk, the sky turned that dull gray blue that always settled over Detroit before night came in. The air cooled, carrying the faint smell of rain somewhere far off. Marcus stepped back inside, wiping his hands on a rag. The kitchen was fuller now. 3 people sat at the table. Another leaned against the wall. Bowls passed from hand to hand, quiet conversation filling the room. Claire moved between them easily, refilling plates, checking on everyone without drawing attention to it. She wasn't in charge, but everything moved because of her. Marcus stood in the doorway watching. This wasn't just a meal. It was something else. Something steady. Something that had been happening long before he showed up. "Dad, you coming?" Jaden asked, already halfway through his second bowl. Marcus hesitated, then nodded once and stepped in. He sat down slower this time. Not like a guest. Not like he belonged either, somewhere in between. A man across from him nodded in quiet acknowledgement. "Appreciate you letting this keep going," he said. Marcus frowned slightly. "I didn't," Claire cut in gently. "He's just saying thank you." Marcus didn't correct her. Didn't know how to. The conversation drifted around him, small and simple. Weather, work, a story about a bus driver who stopped longer than he should have just to make sure someone got on safe. Nothing important, but it all felt grounded. Real. For a moment, Marcus let himself sit in it. Then, a loud crash shattered the air. Glass. Everyone froze. Another sound followed, wood splintering somewhere toward the back of the house. Jaden flinched. Marcus was already on his feet. "Stay here," he said, voice sharp now. He moved fast, pushing through the hallway toward the back door. The kitchen light flickered once, then steadied. Claire was right behind him. "Marcus, I got it," he said. He reached the back door and yanked it open. Cold air rushed in. The yard, the garden beds, something was wrong. He stepped out, boots hitting damp dirt. The small structure near the side of the yard, the one he hadn't paid much attention to earlier, was damaged. Panels shattered, wood cracked. Something had hit it hard. "Greenhouse," Claire said behind him, her voice tight. Marcus turned, scanning the yard. No one there, just the aftermath. A loose board leaned against the side, like it had been pulled free and thrown. Deliberate. Not weather, not an accident. Marcus's jaw clenched. "You got enemies I should know about?" he asked, not looking at her. Claire stepped forward slowly, taking in the damage. "I don't think this was random," she said. "No," Marcus muttered. "It wasn't." Behind them, the door creaked again. One of the men from inside stepped out. "What happened?" Marcus didn't answer. Because he already knew. Or at least, he had a pretty good idea. Richard Coleman didn't hear the word no very often, and he didn't wait long to respond to it. Marcus walked toward the greenhouse, crouching down near the broken frame. His fingers brushed against the edge of a panel, still warm from impact. His chest tightened. "People use this?" he asked. Claire nodded once. "For seedlings, early crops. It keeps things going longer." Marcus exhaled slowly. "Not anymore," he said. Claire didn't respond. She just stood there, staring at what was left of it. Something in her expression shifted. Not anger, not panic. Loss, quiet, contained. Marcus stood up, turning toward the house. The people inside had gone silent now, watching from the doorway. Jaden stood behind them, small, uncertain. "Everyone inside," Marcus said. "Lock the door." Claire looked at him. "This isn't your, it is now," he cut in. The words came out sharper than he intended, but he didn't take them back. People moved, slow at first, then faster. The door shut. The lock clicked. Marcus stayed outside a moment longer, scanning the yard, the street beyond, the shadows where someone could have stood. Nothing. Just the hum of the city and the distant sound of a siren somewhere far off. He stepped back inside. The air felt different now, tighter. The warmth from earlier replaced by something colder. Jaden walked over slowly. "Dad, what happened?" Marcus looked down at him. "Nothing you need to worry about," he said. But the words didn't land. Jaden could see it. Claire moved past them, heading straight for the sink, gripping the edge of it for a second before letting go. Marcus watched her. "You knew this could happen," he said. It wasn't a question. Claire turned slowly. "I knew saying no would come with consequences," she replied. Marcus shook his head. "You didn't just say no," he said. "You brought this here." The room went still. Claire held his gaze. "I didn't bring this," she said quietly. "This was already here. I just didn't step out of the way." Marcus laughed once, short and bitter. "Yeah? Well, now it's my problem too." "No," Claire said. "It was always your problem. You just weren't here to see it." That hit. Harder than anything else she'd said. Marcus took a step forward. "You don't get to say that," he said, voice low now. "I don't get to pretend it's not true either." Silence. Heavy. Jaden looked between them, confused, uneasy. Marcus ran a hand over his face, the anger rising fast now, mixing with something deeper he didn't want to touch. "You should have left when you had the chance," he said. Claire didn't react right away. Then she nodded. "Maybe," she said. She grabbed her jacket from the chair, slipping it on without hurry. The movement caught Marcus off guard. "What are you doing?" he asked. Claire didn't look at him. "Giving you your house back," she said. Jaden stepped forward. "Wait." But she was already moving. Past Marcus, past the table, toward the door. Marcus stood there, frozen for a second. This wasn't what he wanted. Or maybe it was. He didn't know anymore. Claire reached the door and paused just long enough to open it. Cold air slipped in again. She stepped out into the night. And this time, she didn't come back. The door closed behind her. And the house, for the first time since Marcus arrived, it felt empty. Not quiet. Empty. There was a difference. The kind of quiet the house had before Claire came into it. That had weight, but it also had presence. Even in silence, it held something. This was absence. Marcus stood in the middle of the kitchen, staring at the door long after it closed behind her. The cold air that slipped in with her exit still lingered, drifting through the room like something unfinished. No one spoke. The people who had been eating earlier sat still, unsure. One by one they stood, set their bowls in the sink, and left without a word. No one asked what happened. No one needed to. They felt it. The shift. Within minutes, the house was down to just Marcus and Jaden, and the silence pressed in. Jaden stood near the table, looking at the door, then back at his father. "Is she coming back?" he asked quietly. Marcus didn't answer right away, because he didn't know. And for some reason, that unsettled him more than it should have. "She'll be fine," he said finally, his voice flat. That wasn't what Jaden asked. The boy nodded anyway. He always did. Marcus watched him walk slowly to the couch and sit down, pulling his knees up slightly, arms wrapped around them. That look, Marcus knew that look. He had seen it before. Years ago. After his mother passed. After the apartment got packed up too quickly. After they left places without saying goodbye. It was the look of someone who had learned not to hold on too tightly. Because things didn't stay. Marcus rubbed his face hard with both hands, dragging them down slowly. "Go get some sleep," he said. Jaden didn't move. "I'm not tired," he replied. Marcus stepped closer, lowering himself slightly. "Jaden, you said we weren't leaving again," the boy said, not looking at him. The words landed sharper than anything else that night. Marcus froze. "I know," he said. Jaden finally looked up. "You said this was different," he added. Marcus swallowed. "It is. Then why does it feel the same?" Marcus didn't have an answer. He sat down beside him, the couch dipping slightly under his weight. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Outside, a car passed slowly, headlights sweeping across the window, then fading. "I messed up," Marcus said quietly. Jaden didn't respond. "I didn't mean for her to leave," he added. "You told her to," Jaden said. Simple. Honest. Marcus nodded once. "Yeah," he admitted. Jaden leaned his head back against the couch, staring at the ceiling. "She made it feel like home," he said. Marcus closed his eyes. He knew. That was the problem. He had come back to take something, but he hadn't realized someone else had already turned it into something worth keeping. And now it was gone again. Marcus stood up slowly. "I'm going to step outside," he said. Jaden didn't stop him, didn't ask him to stay. That hurt more than if he had. Marcus walked to the door and stepped out onto the porch. The night air hit him harder this time. Colder, sharper. The yard was still. Too still. The broken greenhouse sat in the dark like a reminder, pieces of it catching the faint light from the street. The garden beds looked untouched, but something about them felt off, like they were waiting. Marcus stepped down into the yard, boots sinking slightly into the damp soil. He walked slowly toward the greenhouse, crouching near the damage again. Now that everything was quiet, it felt different. Less like an attack. More like a message. He reached out, picking up one of the shattered panels. Clean break. Deliberate. He set it down. His jaw tightened. "This ain't random," he muttered. A light flicked on across the street. Marcus looked up. Miss Evelyn stood on her porch, arms crossed, watching him. She didn't wave, didn't call out, just watched. Marcus straightened and walked toward the fence line. "What?" he called out. Her voice came back steady. "You let her go," she said. Marcus frowned. "That ain't your business." She shook her head slowly. "Everything on this block is everybody's business," she replied. Marcus let out a short breath. She wasn't supposed to be here in the first place. Miss Evelyn stepped down one step from her porch. "And yet she stayed," she said, "when nobody else did." Marcus didn't respond, because he couldn't argue that. "You think that man in that car earlier don't know what he's doing?" she added. Marcus looked up sharply. "You saw him?" "I see everything," she said simply. Marcus turned slightly, looking down the street where the SUV had disappeared hours ago. "He's been circling this place for years," Miss Evelyn continued. "Waiting." "For what?" "For somebody to slip," she said. "For somebody to not be paying attention." Marcus clenched his jaw. "He came with money," he said. "Thought that'd be enough." Miss Evelyn let out a dry laugh. "It usually is." Marcus looked back at her. "But not this time," he said. She studied him carefully. "You sure about that?" she asked. Marcus didn't answer. Because now, he wasn't. Miss Evelyn nodded slowly, like she already knew that. "You better figure it out quick," she said, "because people like him don't wait around for second chances." She turned and stepped back inside, the porch light clicking off behind her. Marcus stood there alone again. The yard stretched out in front of him, the house behind him, and somewhere in between, a line he hadn't realized he was standing on. He looked back at the front door, at the faint glow of light coming from inside, at the place that had started to feel like something real, and then lost it just as fast. Marcus exhaled slowly. He had spent 5 years running from this place, running from what it meant, from what it held. But now, running wasn't an option anymore. Not with his son inside. Not with people watching. Not with someone like Richard Coleman already making moves. Marcus turned back toward the house and walked up the steps. He opened the door quietly. Jaden was still on the couch, still awake. He looked up when Marcus stepped in. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Marcus said it. "I'm not leaving," he said. Jaden didn't move. "Not this time," Marcus added, "no matter what." The boy studied his face carefully, like he was trying to decide if those words meant anything, if they were different from the others. After a long second, Jaden nodded once. Then slowly, he reached for the blanket beside him and pulled it up. Marcus stood there, watching him settle. The house was still quiet, still missing something. But for the first time since Claire walked out, there was something else in the air too. Not warmth, not yet, but something close to it. A decision. And sometimes, that was where everything started. Not with a plan, not with certainty, just a decision. Marcus didn't sleep much that night, but it wasn't the same kind of restless he'd felt before. This wasn't about running anymore. It was about staying. And staying meant doing something he hadn't done in a long time, facing what was in front of him, without looking away. Morning came quieter than the day before. No smell of food, no low voices in the kitchen, no movement that didn't belong to him or Jaden. The house felt stripped down, like someone had taken the warmth with them when they left. Marcus stood in the kitchen, staring at the empty counter. The pot from last night had been cleaned and set aside. Everything was in its place. Too much in its place. Jaden walked in slowly, dragging his feet just a little. He looked around once, then sat at the table without saying anything. Marcus opened the cabinet, pulled out a box of cereal he didn't remember buying, and set it down. Jaden didn't reach for it. "You hungry?" Marcus asked. Jaden shrugged. "I guess." Marcus poured the cereal into a bowl anyway, added milk, and set it in front of him. Jaden stared at it for a second, then quietly started eating. No complaints, no excitement, just going through the motion. Marcus leaned back against the counter, arms crossed. This wasn't right. He didn't need anyone to tell him that. He could feel it in the way the house echoed now, in the way Jaden didn't look up, in the way everything felt like it was missing something important. Marcus pushed off the counter. "Finish that," he said. "We got work to do." Jaden looked up slightly. "What kind of work?" Marcus glanced toward the back door. "The kind that makes things better," he said. Jaden didn't fully understand, but he nodded. The backyard looked worse in daylight. The broken greenhouse wasn't just damage, it was loss. Panels cracked clean through. The frame bent in ways that weren't easy to fix. Inside, trays of seedlings had been knocked over, dirt scattered, fragile shoots crushed under debris. Marcus stood there for a moment, hands on his hips. Jaden stepped beside him, quiet. "Can we fix it?" he asked. Marcus looked down at him, then back at the mess. "Yeah," he said. Jaden's eyes lifted slightly. "Really?" Marcus nodded once. "Yeah, we can." He didn't know exactly how yet, but that wasn't the point. He grabbed a pair of gloves from the shed, one of the few things that hadn't been moved or replaced, and handed a smaller pair to Jaden. "Careful where you step," he said. "Glass everywhere." Jaden nodded and followed him in. They worked in silence at first, picking up broken panels, stacking what could be salvaged, brushing dirt back into place. It wasn't fast, and it wasn't clean, but it was something. Marcus moved with a steady rhythm, his hands remembering what his mind hadn't planned yet. He measured angles without thinking, tested the frame, checked what would hold and what wouldn't. Jaden worked slower, more careful. Every now and then he'd stop, looking at a crushed plant, then gently set it aside like it still mattered. Marcus noticed that, didn't say anything, just kept working. Hours passed like that. The sun climbed higher, then started to dip again. And little by little, the space began to take shape again. Not perfect, not finished, but standing. Marcus stepped back, wiping sweat from his forehead with the back of his arm. "It'll hold," he said. Jaden looked up at it. "It looks better," he said. Marcus nodded. "Yeah, it does." But something still felt incomplete. Marcus walked back toward the house, stepping inside. The kitchen felt the same, empty. He looked at the counter again, then at the cabinet, then at the door. A thought settled in. Not loud, not dramatic. Just clear. He grabbed his keys. "Come on," he said. Jaden blinked. "Where are we going?" Marcus didn't answer right away. "Store," he said finally. The grocery store sat 3 blocks over, lights buzzing under a faded sign that had seen better days. Inside, the aisles were half-stocked, shelves uneven, but it had what they needed. Marcus pushed the cart slowly, scanning. Rice, beans, canned vegetables, bread. He added more than he planned, more than just for them. Jaden noticed. "Why are we getting so much?" he asked. Marcus paused for a second, then shrugged slightly. "Because people are gonna be hungry," he said. Jaden didn't question it. He just nodded. By the time they got back, the sky had turned that soft orange that came right before dark. Marcus carried the bags inside, setting them on the counter. Jaden followed, unloading quietly. Marcus stood there for a moment, looking at everything. Then he moved. Not fast, not rushed, just steady. He filled the pot with water, set it on the stove, turned the flame on. The sound of it clicking, then catching, filled the room. He chopped vegetables the way his mom used to, rough, but with purpose. Onions, carrots, celery. He didn't measure anything, didn't need to. The smell came back slowly. Not the same, not yet. But close enough. Jaden sat at the table, watching. "You doing what she did?" he asked. Marcus paused for half a second, then nodded. "Yeah," he said. "Why?" Marcus stirred the pot slowly. "Because it was right when she did it," he said. "And it's still right now." Jaden leaned back slightly. "That means she might come back," he said. Marcus didn't answer, but he didn't disagree either. The first knock came just after dark. Soft, uncertain. Marcus froze for a second, then walked to the door and opened it. A man stood there, older, thin jacket, eyes tired. He looked past Marcus, then back again. Is this still open?" he asked. Marcus didn't hesitate. "Yeah," he said. "Come in." The man nodded and stepped inside slowly. Another knock followed, then another. Word traveled faster than Marcus expected. Within an hour, the kitchen was full again. Not like before. Not as smooth, not as easy, but alive. People sat where they could. Bowls passed from hand to hand. Low voices filled the space again. Marcus moved between them, refilling plates, making sure no one left empty. He didn't say much, didn't explain anything. He just did the work. Jaden watched from the table, something different in his eyes now. Not confusion, not doubt. Something closer to belief. Marcus caught his gaze for a second, and for the first time since they came back, Jaden smiled. Small, but real. Later that night, when the last person left and the dishes were stacked again, Marcus stood alone in the kitchen. The house wasn't the same as it had been before, but it wasn't empty anymore either. It was something in between, something being built. Again. Marcus leaned back against the counter, exhaling slowly. He didn't know if Claire would come back. Didn't know if what he was doing would be enough. But he knew one thing now. This wasn't about taking the house back. It was about becoming the kind of man who could hold it. And as he stood there, listening to the quiet hum of the house, for the first time in a long time, Marcus felt like he might be getting closer. Closer to understanding. Closer to staying. Closer to something he hadn't known he was missing until it was gone. The next morning didn't feel empty. Not like before. The house held a different kind of quiet now. Earned, not abandoned. The air still carried the faint scent of last night's food, and the kitchen looked used again. Bowls stacked, chairs slightly out of place, The small signs that something had happened here. Something real. Marcus stood by the window, coffee in hand, watching the street wake up. A man walked past with a slow limp. A kid on a bike rode by, tires rattling against cracked pavement. Across the street, Miss Evelyn swept her porch in steady strokes, glancing up just once in his direction before looking away again. Not cold, not warm either. Just watching. Marcus took a sip of his coffee. Behind him, Jaden shuffled into the kitchen, hair messy, eyes still half closed. "You made food again?" he asked, noticing the pot on the stove. Marcus nodded. "Leftovers," he said. Jaden smiled faintly. "Good." That was new. Marcus noticed, and he held on to it. The day moved differently. Not slow, not heavy, but focused. Marcus spent the morning repairing what he could around the house, fixing a loose hinge, reinforcing a section of the porch railing. Small things, but each one mattered now in a way they hadn't before. Jaden followed him most of the time, handing him tools, asking questions, learning without realizing it. "What's that do?" he asked, pointing at the drill. "Helps things stay where they're supposed to," Marcus replied. Jaden nodded like that made perfect sense. Maybe it did. By early afternoon, Marcus wiped his hands and stepped back from the porch. The house looked better. Not perfect, but stronger. He turned toward the yard, glancing at the greenhouse, still standing, still holding. He exhaled slowly. Then, the sound of tires rolling over gravel again. Marcus's head snapped toward the street. The same black SUV, slower this time, more deliberate. It pulled up directly in front of the house and stopped. Jaden noticed too. "That the same guy?" he asked. Marcus didn't answer. He didn't need to. The driver's door opened. Richard Coleman stepped out again. But this time, he wasn't alone. Another car followed behind him. Then another. 3 vehicles now lined the curb. Marcus's stomach tightened. "This ain't just a visit," he muttered. Jaden stepped closer to him. "What's going on?" Marcus placed a hand lightly on his shoulder. "Stay inside," he said. "Don't come out unless I say so." Jaden nodded, but his eyes didn't leave the window. Marcus stepped outside. The air felt heavier now. Not just tense, controlled, like something was already in motion. Richard walked toward him at the same calm pace as before. But now there were others behind him. 2 men in suits, another holding a folder. Marcus stayed on the porch. "You don't waste time," Marcus said. Richard smiled slightly. "I told you time runs out faster than people expect." Marcus crossed his arms. "What do you want?" Richard stopped at the base of the steps. "To resolve things," he said. One of the men behind him stepped forward, opening the folder and pulling out a document. "Property delinquency notice," he said, voice flat and official. "Back taxes, unpaid penalties, city compliance violations." Marcus cut him off. "I'm handling it." Richard tilted his head slightly. "Are you?" Marcus's jaw tightened. "I said I am." Richard studied him for a moment, then nodded slowly. "I believe you think that," he said. Marcus took a step forward. "You got something to say it straight." Richard didn't flinch. "All right," he said. "Here it is straight." He gestured lightly to the house. "This property is part of a redevelopment zone. It's been flagged for acquisition for over a year. The only reason it hasn't moved forward is because someone's been keeping it just functional enough to avoid enforcement. Marcus's eyes flicked toward the house, toward the life that had been here before he came back, then back at Richard. "That's not your concern," he said. "It is when I'm the one buying the entire block," Richard replied calmly. That landed. Marcus felt it. Behind him, the front door creaked open. Claire stepped out. Marcus didn't turn right away, but he felt it, the shift. Richard saw her immediately, and this time, he didn't hide his recognition. "Claire," he said. Her name sounded different coming from him. Colder. Sharper. Claire walked down the steps slowly, stopping beside Marcus. She didn't look at him. Her eyes were on Richard. "You didn't need to come here," she said. Richard smiled faintly. "I gave you the chance to walk away quietly," he replied. Claire's expression didn't change. "I already told you no." Richard nodded once. "And I told you that wouldn't be enough." Silence settled between them. Marcus looked from one to the other. "You want to tell me what's really going on?" he asked. Claire didn't answer. Richard did. "She didn't mention it?" he said lightly. Marcus's eyes narrowed. "Mention what?" Richard stepped a little closer. "The fact that she's the reason this property is still standing." Marcus frowned. "I know that." "No," Richard said. "You don't." Claire's jaw tightened slightly. "Richard, she's not just some woman fixing up an empty house," he continued, ignoring her. "She walked away from a very large amount of money to sit here and pretend this place could survive without it." Marcus looked at Claire. Something shifted. "What is he talking about?" he asked. Claire stayed silent. Richard smiled again. "That's right," he said softly. "You didn't tell him." Marcus's chest tightened. "Tell me what?" Claire finally spoke. "My family owns half the developments he's trying to push through," she said. The words landed hard. Marcus blinked. "What?" Richard nodded. "Whitmore Holdings," he said. "Ever heard of it?" Marcus shook his head slowly. Claire didn't look at him. "I left," she said, 2 years ago. "Left what?" Marcus asked. "Everything," she replied. Richard let out a quiet breath. "She didn't just leave," he corrected. "She walked away from a seat at the table, from decisions that affect places like this every day." Marcus looked between them, trying to catch up. "You're telling me," he started, then stopped. Claire met his eyes now, and for the first time, there was something different there. Not calm, not steady, exposed. "I didn't want to be part of pushing people out," she said. Marcus's mind raced. All the pieces, the way she fixed the house, the way she fed people, the way she stood her ground. It all clicked. "You could have had anything," he said slowly. Claire nodded. "I know." "And you chose this?" "Yes." Marcus stared at her, then looked back at Richard. "So what? This is some kind of test?" he asked. Richard laughed softly. "No," he said. "This is a problem." He gestured around them. "She's in the way," he added. Claire didn't react. Marcus did. "You don't get to call her that," he said. Richard's expression cooled. "I get to call it what it is," he replied. Marcus stepped forward. "No, you don't." The tension snapped tight. For a moment, no one moved. Then Richard exhaled slowly. This isn't personal, he said. It's business. Marcus shook his head. Yeah, he said. That's the problem. Richard looked at him carefully now. Really looked, like he was reassessing something. You're going to lose this place, he said, sooner or later. Marcus didn't back down. Not today, he replied. Richard held his gaze for a long second, then nodded once. All right, he said. He turned and walked back toward his car. But before getting in, he glanced over his shoulder. This isn't over, he said. Then he got in. The SUV pulled away. The others followed. The street fell quiet again. Marcus stood there, breathing a little heavier than before. He turned slowly. Claire was still beside him, but everything about her felt different now. Not smaller, not bigger, just clearer. You were never just passing through, Marcus said. Claire shook her head slightly. No, she said. Marcus looked back at the house, then at her. And for the first time since she walked out the night before, he understood. She hadn't come here to hide. She had come here to stand. And now, so was he. The air didn't settle after Richard left. It lingered. Heavy, charged, like something had already been set in motion, and all they could do now was decide how to stand when it hit. Marcus stayed on the porch a while longer, eyes fixed on the end of the street where the SUVs had disappeared. His jaw was tight, his mind running through everything Richard had said, and everything he hadn't. Behind him, the door creaked softly. Claire didn't step outside this time. She stayed just inside the frame, like there was still a line she wasn't sure she had the right to cross again. Marcus turned slightly. You could have told me, he said. His voice wasn't angry. Not exactly. But it wasn't calm either. Claire looked down for a moment, then back at him. I didn't think it mattered, she said. Marcus let out a quiet breath. It matters now. A pause. Yeah, she said. It does. Marcus stepped back inside. The house felt different again. Not empty. Not full. Just aware. Like it understood something had shifted. Jaden stood near the hallway, watching both of them. You okay? Marcus asked. Jaden nodded, but his eyes moved between them carefully. Is she staying? He asked. Claire didn't answer. Marcus looked at her, then back at Jaden. Yeah, he said. She's staying. Claire blinked slightly, not surprised, but saw something close to it. Jaden nodded once. That was enough for him. He turned and walked back toward his room like everything had just been settled. Kids had a way of doing that. Marcus looked at Claire again. We're not done talking, he said. I know, but not out here, he added, glancing toward the street. Claire nodded. They moved into the kitchen. The same table, the same chairs. But now everything felt sharper, more exposed. Marcus leaned his hands on the table. Start from the beginning, he said. Claire took a slow breath. I grew up around people like him, she said. Developers, investors, people who look at neighborhoods like this and only see numbers. Marcus listened. They call it progress, she continued. Revitalization. But what it really means is pushing people out who can't keep up with what comes next. Marcus nodded slowly. I've seen that, he said. Claire met his eyes. I was supposed to be part of that, she said. My father built half those projects. I was next in line to take over. Marcus frowned slightly. But you walked away. Yes. Why? Claire hesitated. Not because she didn't know. Because saying it out loud made it real. Because I couldn't pretend it didn't matter, she said quietly. The people, the families. What gets lost when places like this disappear? Marcus studied her. And this house? Claire glanced around. It was supposed to be empty, she said. Just another property waiting to be bought out. But it wasn't. Completely gone. Marcus followed her gaze. The walls, the kitchen, the small details that still carried something from before. It still felt like someone lived here, she added, even when they didn't. Marcus exhaled slowly. So you stayed, he said. I stayed, she confirmed. And built all this. Claire nodded. Not because I owned it, she said, but because someone should have been here. Marcus let that settle. Because now, he understood something he hadn't before. She didn't take the house from him. She protected it. While he was gone. Marcus leaned back slightly. And Richard? He asked. Claire's expression tightened just a little. He doesn't like obstacles, she said. Especially ones he can't control. Marcus gave a short nod. Yeah, I got that. A knock interrupted them. Not hesitant this time. Firm, deliberate. Marcus and Claire both turned toward the door. Jaden stepped back into the hallway, watching. Marcus moved first, opening the door. Two men stood there. Not Richard. Different. One in a city jacket, the other holding a clipboard. Marcus Reed? The man with the clipboard asked. Marcus's stomach tightened. Yeah. The man nodded and flipped a page. We're here regarding a compliance inspection, he said. We received a report about unauthorized structural modifications and occupancy violations. Marcus blinked once, then again. From who, he asked, though he already knew. The man didn't answer that. Mind if we come in, he said. Marcus hesitated, then stepped aside. They walked in like they'd done it before. Like this was routine, like this house was just another file. Claire stepped forward. This is unnecessary, she said calmly. The man glanced at her briefly. Ma'am, we're just doing our job. Marcus watched as they moved through the house, checking corners, making notes, measuring things that didn't need measuring. It wasn't about safety. It was about pressure. He could feel it now. The slow squeeze. Jaden stood still, eyes wide, watching strangers move through what had just started to feel like his home. Marcus crouched slightly beside him. It's all right, he said quietly. Jaden didn't look convinced. After a few minutes, the men returned to the front. We'll be filing a report, the clipboard man said. You'll receive notice regarding next steps. Marcus nodded once. Yeah, he said. The men left as quickly as they came. The door closed. Silence followed. Claire exhaled slowly. He's escalating, she said. Marcus leaned his head back slightly, staring at the ceiling. Good, he said. Claire looked at him. That doesn't worry you? Marcus dropped his gaze back to hers. It does, he admitted. Then he straightened. But it also tells me something. What? Marcus's voice steadied. That he thinks we're a problem. A small pause. Claire's expression shifted. Which means? Marcus looked around the house. At Jaden, at the kitchen, at everything that had been built here. It means we're doing something right. The words settled into the room. Not loud, not dramatic, but solid. Claire held his gaze for a long moment. Then, slowly, she nodded. And just like that, the line had been drawn. Not by money, not by ownership, but by choice. And this time, they were standing on the same side. It didn't feel like victory. Not yet. It felt like pressure. The kind that builds slowly, tightening around everything until something gives. But for the first time since Marcus came back, he wasn't carrying it alone. That mattered. More than he expected. The next few days moved fast. Not chaotic. Focused. Marcus woke up before sunrise, the habit of years on the road still wired into him. The house was quiet at that hour, the kind of quiet that felt earned instead of empty. He stepped onto the porch with a cup of coffee, the air cool, the sky just starting to lighten over the rooftops. The block looked different now. Not cleaner, not safer, but aware. People noticed what was happening. Doors opened earlier. Lights stayed on a little longer. There was movement. Small, quiet, but real. Claire joined him a few minutes later, standing a few feet away, not saying anything. They didn't need to. The silence between them had changed. It wasn't distance anymore. It was understanding. "You always wake up this early?" she asked after a while. Marcus nodded. "Used to fixing things before people noticed they were broken," he said. Claire glanced at him. "That's a lonely way to live." Marcus shrugged slightly. "Yeah," he said. "It is." A beat passed. Then Claire said, "You don't have to do that here." Marcus didn't answer. But he heard her. By mid-morning, people started showing up. Not just for food, for help. A man brought a broken chair. A woman asked if Marcus could take a look at her back steps. Another neighbor mentioned a leak that had been getting worse for months. Marcus didn't advertise, didn't offer. But he didn't turn anyone away either. He moved from one thing to the next, fixing what he could, explaining what he couldn't, showing Jaden along the way. "Hold that steady," he'd say. "Like this?" Jaden would ask. "Yeah, just like that." And the boy would beam like he'd built something himself. Claire watched it all from the porch, arms folded loosely, not stepping in unless she needed to. But she noticed everything. The way people spoke to Marcus. Different now. Not suspicious. Not distant. Respectful. Careful. Like they were starting to see him not as the man who left, but the man who stayed. By afternoon, the kitchen was full again. But this time, it wasn't just people passing through. It was neighbors. People from the block. People who had watched Marcus return with doubt in their eyes. Now sitting at his table, eating his food, talking in low, steady voices. Miss Evelyn sat at the far end, sipping coffee slowly, watching everything without missing a detail. She caught Marcus's eye once, nodded, just once. That was enough. Jaden moved between people easily now, carrying plates, handing out bread, smiling in a way Marcus hadn't seen in years. Not forced, not careful, just free. Claire stepped into the kitchen, setting down another tray. "You're running out of space," she said. Marcus looked around. She wasn't wrong. People stood along the walls, sitting wherever they could. The house felt alive again, stronger than before. "We'll make it work," Marcus said. Claire studied him for a moment, then nodded. "I think you already are." Late that afternoon, a truck pulled up out front. Not black, not polished. Old, dust-covered. A man stepped out, mid-50s, work boots, hands rough from years of labor. He looked at the house like he wasn't sure what he'd find. Then he walked up to the porch. Marcus met him halfway. "You Marcus?" the man asked. "Yeah." The man nodded slowly. "Name's Walter," he said. "I heard you're fixing things around here." Marcus glanced at the truck. "You got something needs fixing?" Walter shook his head. "Not today," he said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "Got something else," he added. Marcus frowned slightly as he took it. It was a receipt. Old city office stamp, property tax. Paid, partial. Marcus looked up. "What is this?" Walter shifted his weight slightly. "Word travels," he said. "Heard you got pressure coming your way." Marcus didn't respond. Walter continued. "I worked construction on this block 20 years ago," he said. "Built half the houses that got torn down later. Didn't sit right with me then. Still doesn't." He nodded toward the house. "Place like this stays standing. That matters." Marcus looked back at the paper. "You don't have to do this." Walter shook his head. "Yeah," he said. "I do." He stepped back. "Figure it's time somebody did." Then he turned and walked back to his truck. Marcus stood there, the paper in his hand. Claire stepped beside him. "What is it?" she asked. Marcus handed it to her. She read it quickly, then looked up. "That's a start," she said. Marcus nodded slowly. "Yeah," he said. Behind them, another voice called out, "Hey, Marcus!" He turned. A woman from the kitchen stepped forward. "I got something for you too," she said, holding out a small envelope. Then another. And another. Not big. Not enough. But real. Each one. People stepping forward. One by one. No speeches. No announcements. Just choosing. Marcus felt something shift deep in his chest. Not relief. Not yet. But something stronger. Recognition. He wasn't doing this alone anymore. Claire watched it happen, something in her expression softening. "This is what he doesn't understand," she said quietly. Marcus glanced at her. "Who?" "Richard," she replied. "He sees numbers, deals, transactions." She gestured lightly toward the people gathered around them. "He doesn't see this." Marcus looked around. At the faces. At the hands offering what they could. At the house that had become more than just walls. "Yeah," he said. "He doesn't." Jaden stepped up beside him, holding a small jar. "What about this?" he asked. Marcus looked down. Inside the jar, coins, bills, small but full. Jaden smiled. "It's mine," he said. "From my birthday." Marcus's throat tightened. "You don't have to." "I want to," Jaden said. Simple, clear. Marcus nodded slowly. "All right," he said. He took the jar carefully, not like it was money, like it was something more. Because it was. Claire looked at them both, and for the first time, she smiled. Not small, not hidden, real. Because something had changed. Not just in the house, not just in the block, in Marcus. He wasn't the man who left anymore. He wasn't even the man who came back. He was something else now. Someone people believed in. Someone they chose. And as Marcus stood there, surrounded by people who had once doubted him, he realized something he hadn't expected. This wasn't about saving the house anymore. The house had already done that. This was about becoming the man it needed him to be. The final notice came 3 days later. Not dramatic, not loud. Just a white envelope, slid through the mail slot, like it didn't carry the weight of everything behind it. Marcus found it on the floor when he came back in from the yard, hands still dusty from reinforcing the greenhouse frame one last time. The afternoon light stretched long across the kitchen floor, catching the edge of the envelope like it was trying to warn him. He picked it up. Didn't open it right away. He already knew. Claire stood at the counter, watching him quietly. Jaden sat at the table, drawing something on a piece of scrap paper, lines and shapes that looked like the house but stronger, bigger, like the version in his head. Marcus slid a thumb under the seal. Opened it. Read. Then read it again. The room didn't change, but something inside him did. They're moving the timeline up, he said finally. Claire didn't ask who. She didn't need to. How long? She asked. Marcus let out a slow breath. Not long enough. Silence settled. Not heavy. Not panicked. Just real. Jaden looked up. What does that mean? He asked. Marcus folded the letter carefully. It means we got work to do, he said. Jaden nodded. That was enough for him. The next few days moved like a clock that wouldn't slow down. Calls were made. Receipts gathered. Every dollar counted. The envelopes from neighbors stacked in a drawer, each one small on its own, but together, something that couldn't be ignored. Claire worked the phones in ways Marcus couldn't. Quiet conversations. Names he didn't recognize. Doors that opened because of who she used to be and who she had chosen not to be anymore. Marcus worked with his hands. Fixing, building. Taking on anything anyone brought him, not for the money, but because it was what he knew how to give. And people kept showing up. Not because they were asked, because they chose to. Miss Evelyn brought coffee every morning. Walter came back with tools Marcus didn't have. Tony stayed longer than usual, helping without saying much. And Jaden stayed right beside Marcus. Learning. Watching. Becoming something stronger than the boy who had asked if they'd ever have a home again. The morning of the deadline came cold. Clear. The kind of day where everything felt sharper, more defined. Marcus stood on the porch, looking out over the yard. The greenhouse stood. Not perfect, but solid. The garden beds were lined up, green pushing through again where they had been broken. The house behind him was full, not just with people, with something deeper. Claire stepped out beside him. You ready? She asked. Marcus nodded once. Yeah. They didn't say more. They didn't need to. The city office was smaller than Marcus expected. Fluorescent lights, gray walls. A counter that had seen too many hands pass over it. Richard Coleman was already there. Of course he was, standing near the back, hands folded, calm as ever. like this was already decided. Marcus walked in with Claire beside him, Jaden between them. Not hiding, not shrinking, standing. Richard glanced up, and for the first time, something in his expression shifted. Not doubt, but recognition. "You came," he said. Marcus didn't respond. He stepped forward to the counter, setting down the folder. Receipts, payments, every dollar they had pulled together. Not perfect, but enough. The clerk flipped through the papers slowly. The room held its breath. Claire's hand rested lightly on the counter. Marcus's stayed still. Jaden watched everything. Minutes passed, longer than they should have. Then, the clerk looked up. "This covers the outstanding amount," she said. Just like that. Simple. Final. Marcus exhaled, not loud, but deep. Richard didn't move, didn't react, but the stillness around him changed. The certainty he walked in with was gone. Claire turned slightly, meeting his eyes. "Sometimes," she said quietly, "people are worth more than the numbers." Richard held her gaze. Then, slowly, he nodded. Not agreement, not acceptance, just acknowledgement. He turned and walked out. No threats, no last words. Just gone. The ride back felt different, quieter, lighter. Jaden leaned back in his seat, staring out the window. "We did it," he said. Marcus glanced at him. "Yeah," he said, "we did." Claire didn't say anything, but she smiled. That evening, the house was full again. Not because it had to be, because people wanted to be there. Food on the table, voices in the air, laughter that didn't feel careful anymore. Marcus stood in the kitchen, watching it all. Not from the outside, from inside it. Claire stepped beside him. "You kept it," she said. Marcus shook his head slightly. "No," he replied. He looked around. At the people. At Jaden. At the house that had become something more than he ever expected. "We did," he corrected. Claire nodded. Then she reached into her pocket, pulled something out, and set it on the counter between them. Marcus looked down. A ring. His mother's ring. The one from the box. "I think it belongs out here now," Claire said. Marcus picked it up slowly. The metal caught the light from the kitchen window. Warm. Steady. Real. He looked at her, then back at the room. And for the first time since he came back, everything made sense. Later that night, when the house had quieted down again, Marcus stepped out onto the porch. The air was cold, the sky clear. Jaden ran out behind him, laughing, chasing something only he could see. Marcus watched him, then looked back at the house, at the light spilling out through the windows, at the place he thought he had lost. He hadn't come back to take it. He had come back to become someone who could belong to it. Claire stepped out beside him, standing close but not touching. Neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. Because some things didn't need words. They just needed time, and presence, and the choice to stay. Marcus leaned against the railing, exhaling slowly. "He came back for a house," he said quietly. Claire glanced at him. Marcus shook his head slightly, a faint smile pulling at the corner of his mouth, but found a place where he was finally allowed to belong. The light behind them stayed on. The door stayed open. And for the first time in a long time, home wasn't something he was chasing. It was something he was living. If this story stayed with you, if you've ever had to go back somewhere you weren't sure you could face, or found home in a place you didn't expect, then maybe you understand. Sometimes, the thing you think you're saving is the very thing that saves you. When Marcus stood on that porch, holding his mother's ring while Jaden laughed in the yard behind him, he finally understood. This house was never just waiting for him. It was waiting for the man he had to become. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do isn't say the right words. It's to stay, to show up, and to do the work even when no one is watching. Because real change doesn't come from what you promise. It comes from what you're willing to rebuild with your own hands. So today, think about one place, one person, or one responsibility you've been avoiding, just like Marcus once did. Maybe you don't need to fix everything. Maybe you just need to show up and start. If this story touched you, comment one below. And tell me, have you ever come back to something you thought was lost, only to realize it was waiting for you all along? There's another story coming, one that might change the way you see second chances.